The Next Chapter with Prim Siripipat is a production of iHeartRadio. Funniest moment as an athlete?
There's so many. In wrestling, there's just so many crazy personalities. It's kind of a wild sport. But let's one that's PG and fair game would be 2002. we wrestle in this tournament in Las Vegas, and it's not a nightclub story, but it's called the Las Vegas Invitational. And it's the toughest tournament of the year outside the NCAA. So you really have to peak early because we don't see all the Big 10, Big 12 guys, but we do see them there. So it was a big deal for ranking, and it was a big deal for competition and setting the pace of the season. So, we're peaking, we're prepped, we're down to weight. Me and my roommate in the hotel are ready for bed. We set the alarm clock, which we feel is the right time. And we wake up in the morning and we're ready. And, we get our gear, we get the scale. We're making our walk over to the arena, and we're like, it looks pretty dark. But the difference between 5, 6, 7 a.m. at that time, the lighting, it wasn't substantial, but we're like, it should start to get light soon. So we're walking in, everything's pretty desolate. We go to the arena. We've never been the first people at the arena ever, and we were the only ones there. And then we see some janitors and some people mulling around, but really just workers. We go inside, it's this empty, huge arena with all these mats, and we're sitting there and we're like, all right, we'll wait 15 minutes, 20 minutes, nothing's happening. So I went back out, asked the janitor, I was like, hey, do you have the time? And he's like, it's 4:20 in the morning. And we're just like, oh my God, what's going on? So we decide, we're like, all right, well, I guess we're just going to nap on the mats until people show up, because it was like a pain to go all the way back to the hotel, get a cab and all this stuff. So we go back and we just pass out because we're exhausted because we didn't really sleep the night before. And all the athletes start walking in and they see us huddled up against each other, cuddling. And so we're it was just a terrible precedent to set for a macho fighting sport. And so we turned out that the clock, and we didn't have cell phones back then. So it was just some kind of clock we either brought or had. It had a different time zone, settings on it, and we set it for the Eastern time zone, so we were 3 hours early.
My gosh!
But the irony was, it was the best tournament I wrestled probably in college outside the NCAAs, because I ended up winning. And so I guess cuddle your teammates more in a public setting. I think that's the moral of the story.
Hey everybody, it's Prim. Welcome to The Next Chapter, presented by Baron Davis and Slick Studios. This week's guest is 3-time All-American winner, the 2004 NCAA champion and Most Outstanding Wrestler Award winner, and the 2005 World University Games champion, Jesse Jantzen. Now, coming out of Long Island, some, including the Suffolk Times, have said that the state of New York has never seen a wrestler like Jesse before. In high school, he was the first 4-time state champion and 6-time state place winner in New York wrestling history. And after 4 seasons in college, he finished with a 131-13 record. Until this day, is the most decorated wrestler in Harvard history. After college, he pursued his dreams of competing at the Olympics, but fell short of his goal during the 2008 Olympic trials. But despite that, he has since made a name for himself on Wall Street, in the financial services world, within the entertainment and film industry, as an actor, choreographer, and also stuntman, and also within the community as a board member of the Fetal Center for the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, the Harvard Varsity Club, and also Beat the Streets, an organization that supports 3,000 plus athletes in the New York City area, aimed at teaching life lessons through wrestling. I think what stands out to me in this interview is how Jesse, like all the other guests I've interviewed over the course of the show, struggled in saying goodbye to the sport he loves so much, especially after having not achieved the Olympic goals he set for himself. And also how he's used that disappointment as fuel heading into his post-retirement career. And so he uses that disappointment, that chip on his shoulder, as he calls it, as a positive source of motivation. And it's the reason why he's so driven today and has accomplished so much after retiring from sport. And that made me reflect on my own athletic journey and how maybe I should be grateful for the disappointment I experienced and how my tennis career ended, because without that disappointment, maybe I would have never achieved the things I've achieved in sports broadcasting or in my pro tennis comeback several years ago, or even today as a PhD student and wife and mother. Maybe I wouldn't be as committed to constantly having to prove myself every day. It's an inspiring conversation because it shows how sport can teach us over time about the value of resiliency and bouncing back after any setback. So, without further ado, here's Jesse Jantzen. It's funny because I think most people know the highlights, which is what we would put on the resume, what is out there on the Wikipedias and the general web pages. But what are some of the things that people do not know about you or do not ask about you, especially as it relates to just your athletic journey and even your personal journey?
My athletic journey and personal journey, they don't know. I mean, a lot of what I spend time on since I left the phone, my brother-in-law and my dad passed, I dedicate a lot to philanthropy. So I am one of the chairman of the board for Beat the Streets, which is a national organization with 11 cities now. So I think people kind of know that's a big piece of what I'm doing in the wrestling community. But, we feel the lessons that we've learned as wrestlers through sport, parallel life. And for me to get access to a Harvard education, without a question, without wrestling, I wouldn't have had that opportunity. So I want to give that opportunity to our kids, our boys and girls in all of our 12 cities now with Beat the Streets. We supply mentorship and internships, SAT prep, sports training, coaching, all sorts of things. And I think that, we've seen over the past 15 years, real progress with, getting college educations, some Ivy League graduates, kids coming from, pretty much nothing and low income broken families to getting, becoming doctors, from Brown University and Cornell. So I think we're making progress. It's always hard with nonprofits because the day to day, you don't always see the results that you want, but, I think that we're impacting lives and sports can do that. So.
That's awesome. Well, it sounds like over the past several years, you've kind of taken a turn towards really trying to give back or have an impact or make an impact with the community. I know there's something of upwards of maybe 4,000 athletes within the NYC area that Beat the Streets supports. Is it around that or so?
Yeah, it's probably around that, like 3,000 probably boys and girls. And then nationally, it's near 10,000 now. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, and we want to scale. We want to add, 3 more cities in the next year, and then use national as a platform to really get big corporate sponsors. We're in talks now to subsidize coaching salaries nationwide, and it could be exciting.
Yeah, that's really great. Well, on the surface, oftentimes when I'm talking to younger students or just athletes, I think on the surface they look at my transition and it seems as though it was seamless. But as people have told, I've told my story, many times, but on the surface, I think it looked like it was very efficient and I did well. But beneath the surface, there were a lot of things going on, especially emotionally, just things that I did not resolve for many, many, many years. But what was your just transition from sport like and leaving wrestling, especially after what happened at the 2008 Olympic trials?
Yeah. It was really hard. And the older I get, the more I can express it. At the time, I was frustrated, angry, depressed, and, knew I needed to make money and transition to the next thing. The next thing I thought was, and it turns out it was that, which was to go into finance. But it was a real struggle to get a job in 2008. I mean, I was 2 months in my older sister's basement interviewing and felt, pretty down in the dumps. A loss of identity. For so long, whether I liked it or not, I was the wrestler. I was the wrestler at Harvard. I was the guy that was like, breaking some records at Harvard and kind of changing things. And I was from a small school on Long Island that, wrestling was okay, but it wasn't like a major powerhouse before like we came through. And so that was part of my identity. And I didn't realize how big a piece of it was because I never considered myself a wrestler. I said, sports is a vehicle for life, but it can't be your entire identity. And then kind of when it was taken from me, I was like, well, what am I going to do with all this time? I used to train, 6 hours a day and get that gratification and that positive reinforcement through sport, which was, you go to coaching every day, you go to practice every day and your coaches are, good job or this or that, or you have a benchmark. All right, I competed this weekend. I know where I stand. I either won or lost. And then when that kind of gets taken from you, you lose purpose and you lose identity.
Yeah. Well said. I connect with everything. I connect with absolutely everything that you just said. And I don't know if you've had some time to think about it a little bit more, but you're right. I think that the further we get from any sort of experience, whether that's retirement or a transition away from sport or college, whatever it is, the further we get away from anything, the more we're able to articulate and process our thoughts and emotions and feelings about it. Mm-hmm. But have you thought about what contributed to the challenges that you experienced in leaving sport? As in, what made you really, really identify with sport in the sense that you had a salient athletic identity? Have you given it any thought?
Why I identified that way, or why I enjoyed that, or
and why was your athletic identity and your association with sports so strong?
I think what happens is, to be great at anything, you have to be a little obsessive compulsive. You have to just be obsessed with whatever you're working on. And I think that it's this addictive personality that can be good or bad. When you see a lot of addicts that, end up being triathletes and different things because they have to find healthy addictions. And I think with wrestling and all sports, but particularly wrestling, you'll see a lot of guys that just become obsessed. It's like a hurt so good. It's really embarrassing to lose. You're out there in like this unitard, okay? You're alone. It's one-on-one, and you're getting beat up. I know you're not punching each other, but it's just controlled fight, and it's like almost more demeaning. And guess what? In wrestling, the better guy almost always wins. In a fight, they usually win, but you can get caught. Anyone has a puncher's chance. In wrestling, it's just controlled, smothering fight. And it's just like, it's hard. It takes a lot out of you. So the losses hurt so much that you never want to feel that way. So you get addicted to it. And, you love the art form. It's really creative. It's, there's no two ways. There's no one way to do anything. And every body style is different, and they're more predisposed to being better at different techniques. There's so many different techniques to score. As much as it's just like macho kind of, first Olympic sport gladiator thing, it's really creative. So I think it's almost like chess, where people just want to constantly learn. So like you're expanding your mind and body. It's a race to perfection. It's really, the chase to be perfect out there. And, it's not untrue of other sports, but for wrestling, I don't know, maybe it's enhances it more in that way. I don't know. Like I said, the transition was hard because still to this day, I didn't leave my shoes in the mat. In wrestling, you take your shoes off, you put them down the center of the mat, and you kind of have your retirement ceremony. I ended on a note that wasn't ideal. You want to go out. You never go out perfectly. You want to go out on a win. It's not going to be Derek Jeter's, he hits the final run in and then walks off, or hits the home run on his 3,000th hit. Like, not everyone's that lucky. But I didn't retire because I was too old and not physically able to do it. I retired in my late 20s because I wanted to make money. I was mentally exhausted, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I knew that another 4-year commitment would be, living on a coach's salary, which is like rubbing two nickels together, training, 4 hours a day, traveling a lot, but internationally to, all these, Eastern Bloc Europe and all these places in Turkey and Asia and different places to compete against all the wrestling countries. And, I kind of got the taste of, wealth and a better life through seeing people in finance and going to Harvard and seeing how people, were living their lives. And the best thing for a fighter or a wrestler is to be a monk, is to not have tunnel vision and not be exposed to those things. I think in Rocky, Mickey said, the worst thing happened to you as a fighter, you got civilized. And when a fighter, like whether it's just seeing what's out there or getting more money or having an easier lifestyle, you need to be constantly surrounded by guys that are hungry. And just fighting and want it. And, I think at that point I was like, I still could probably make another run at it, maybe another world championship or the Olympics. But, that's another 4 years to postpone being a grown-up. another 4 years where other people are going to be ahead of me when I go into the Wall Street world and those type of things. So it's bittersweet because I don't know if I was going to get paid to compete, I would have kept competing, and that's changed in our sport for the better, which is really great. A lot more money has come into USA Wrestling. A lot more money has come in with sponsors and internationally. So we're getting a lot of our great athletes compete for much longer because of that. And that's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, there's so many different things to unpack there. You know, the fact that when you say that you kind of have to be a monk and take out all the other distractions, it's also something that I hear from football players as well. I think it's also just about the culture in the sense of I'm trying to remember who I was talking to recently, but in anticipation of being drafted, actually I was talking to Doug Lamville, baseball player, former MLB baseball player who went to Penn, Ivy League graduate, and some of the scouts were looking at him and were concerned about his academic endeavors and ambitions because they were worried that he wasn't focused on baseball. And some of those other things, some of the other people that I've interviewed, Robert Smith, former NFL player as well, he was pre-med at Ohio State. Right. And he got a lot of pressure from the coaching staff, be like, why are you going to the lab? Like, I need you to be here for 3 practices. Like I can't have you focus on all these other things. But that's the culture. But it sounds like, with wrestling, the way you're describing it, it is all an over-consuming in the sense of like the chess-like aspect, the creativity. It's almost like, unlike other sports, this one, it has to be all of you and not just the athletic side of it. It's like the person, the cognitive side of you. I don't know. I'm just processing some of the things. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that's true. Obviously, each sport has its own requirement for time and skill and how you develop and become great. Right, great athletes are usually great across the board. Right, they share similar characteristics, I guess. But wrestling, because it has the fight aspect, the preparation, the weight loss, and dieting and management, it's hard. It's hard to go to bed hungry and thirsty all the time, and focus on midterms and finals and getting that paper in and balancing all that. So it's definitely an extra element, especially with that weight management. And then there's so many dimensions to it, and you have to feel perfect. There's no other team to kind of rely on. You were a tennis player, so you get the individuality and know that that's a big part of accountability, and it's just you out there. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think that wrestling does take up a lot of time physically, but also mentally as well.
Do you think some sports are more transformative than other sports? In the sense of, I just did another interview and I asked an athlete, who would you be had you not played sport or football? And the answer was, I think I'd kind of be maybe the same. Maybe I would have done this. But my response in having participated in an individual sport, one that can be very, very consuming, was I think I would have been totally different. So do you think that some sports are more transformative than others?
Maybe. My kindergarten teacher said I was either going to be in jail or the president. And that was before I started wrestling. So there's still hope for either one of those. There's still hope. There's still hope for either one of those outcomes. I'd like to think,
large spectrum.
Yeah. I was like, I don't know. My mom's like, I don't know how to take that. I don't know what's going to happen here. Maybe an R&B singer. That would be great. No. Well, I think your point is that, like, for me, sports, I don't know. I don't know where I would have been. I think I could have gotten into trouble. I think sports, as far as the discipline, the cliche kind of sports analogies that everyone uses, like, the problem is they're true, right? Like, for wrestling, I talked about that obsessiveness, and it was like a healthy obsession, So, like, I think that it gave me direction, it gave me purpose, it gave me access to a great college that I otherwise would have not. I got, good grades and worked hard, but being well-rounded is crucial to go to those universities, as you know. So, I think, I don't know. I think sports was inside of me. So if it wasn't wrestling, maybe it would have focused more on baseball. I grew up doing all sorts of sports, and my dad had a real passion for wrestling and was my coach when I was younger. So I think it was like, what your parents introduce and expose you to. And then if it catches fire, that's kind of what you do a lot of times, or a mentor, or someone that fills that gap for you. But I do think, part of our mission at Beat the Streets is kind of maybe along your question and your point. It's like to give kids, guidance, purpose, extracurriculars, things that can parallel life and teach them lessons, but also keep them busy. Because free time is dangerous for anyone. I think the biggest thing is to stay busy, have purpose, have hobbies you care a lot about, and keep chasing goals. So I think sports check a lot of those boxes, at least when you're young. And then as you get older and you transition, it's like we talked about, it's hard, but you have to transition into something that you want to do for the rest of your life. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the part about just the earlier childhood part, beginning the relationship with sport, and for me, the thing that I'm thinking about right now is if the athlete gravitates towards sport that fits their personality, or if it's just influenced by their environment. Because I knew you come from a family of 4 kids, right? Is it 4 kids?
5 counting me. So it's
okay,
2 boys and 3 girls.
Okay. So large family, a lot of action going on. And all of you guys played multiple sports. I know soccer, baseball for you. And it wasn't until 9th grade that you decided that you really start focusing on wrestling solely.
Yeah, what happened was it was taking up so much time, and my parents were so invested and so kind and so supportive that, I'd have baseball Wednesday, soccer Thursday, wrestling every day, and then weekends. It's like they just couldn't keep up with 5 kids. So it was like, and then everything got specialized too, right? So it was like if you want a college degree, as a college scholarship, you kind of had to specialize at some point. Usually, there are some amazing athletes that do multiple, but wrestling was year-round, nonstop. So in 9th grade, I had, let's say, 35 matches for high school, but then I had 100 and something matches in the off season. So I had, over 3x the matches in the off season. So it was like really busy, even when I wasn't in my high school season. So it didn't leave a lot of time to play baseball or soccer and those things. Though those sports are a lot more fun. I'll say that.
Why do you think they're more fun?
Well, I do love wrestling.
Just more laid back?
Well, it's just kind of nice to get outside of a gymnasium and be outside swinging the bat. Baseball I love because the juxtaposition between wrestling and baseball, it's a team sport versus individual. You don't have to make weight. It's really intense for certain plays. I played shortstop and pitched, and when you're up at the plate, it's intense. When you're pitching or making a play, but then you had time where you could kind of be social. It was more of a social aspect. So it was a nice mix to play both. So.
Mm-hmm. And in 9th grade, you felt like you were better in wrestling? Did you genuinely like it more than all the other sports? How did you make your choice?
Definitely better. I was just doing it a lot more anyway since I was younger. I did those other sports, but almost like casually, but I was pretty good. So I think also in New York State, you can wrestle high school and middle school for all sports. So it's like this weird rule if you pass this like physical fitness test and maturity test. So I was already competing in high school in 7th and 8th grade in wrestling, but I was still playing baseball and soccer, kind of to balance it all out. And I really liked those sports and had fun doing it. But then when high school started, it was just, I think, too much scheduling lines. Plus, I wanted to make sure I was doing well academically. I had a mentor that actually was a volunteer coach. One of the few people that got to Harvard from my high school, but he was older and he was friends with my father. And he was great because he was like he was my coach, academic mentor, and a good friend. And he would always check in. My parents were kind of easygoing about the academics. They were just, we didn't have a legacy of like Ivy League colleges and like that they didn't really know. Maybe their kids could go those places, maybe they couldn't. But it was just like, work as hard as you can. It's kind of the mantra. And this guy was like, oh, how'd you do on your paper? How'd you do on your math test? Are you taking AP courses, the advanced courses? Are you doing this? And like, without him, I would have had no chance for sure. He was like, really good mentor and sounding board for all those things.
That is so fascinating. I remember hearing you in another interview, and you mentioned that your mom didn't go to college. Is that correct? And then you and your brother went to Harvard. I think didn't your sister go to Princeton as well?
Yeah, she played field hockey at Princeton.
So your family did not do well. Like you guys don't know how to fail.
Well, I mean, I think, like I said, being well-rounded in sports, and then, once you go through the process, you have good information. Information is key. Good support system, really good mentors, and, it makes it all possible. So.
Well, as a mother of two sons, I literally, I'm like, I want to bring your parents on here. I want to bring your mom on here to get some parenting advice, because they clearly, obviously, did something really, really well. So you go off to Harvard. You do obviously extremely well. 2004 NCAA title. You accrue all these accolades and accomplishments. So what was the goal when you graduated in 2004?
Was to train till 2008 to make the Olympic team, and then hopefully win gold. I mean, there was always gold or nothing for the most part, but you have to win the Olympic trials to get there. So what I was doing is I was coaching. I was splitting time training at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. Excuse me. And I started working for a real estate company that did some real estate development and managed a few buildings that they had leased out. And I was kind of like, managing the leases and different things, and going door to door and doing different things for them. And I did it for a little while, but it just was like not ideal for training. So I was traveling so much, so I kind of felt bad because I really wasn't there that often. So then I just focused pretty much full-time training and coaching. So I was a volunteer assistant at Harvard for those years, which was neat because my brother was on the team for at least 1 or 2 years. I overlapped with him as a coach, which was cool.
Wow.
I guess a couple, like 1 or 2, I guess, which is great. He probably hated it because I would, I'm smothering him, because it's always, you always want him to do better than yourself. And you always like, you're like, I was 7 years older. So it's like a brother, but parents, but uncle and coach. So, and my dad was a lot better at handling and the coaching son relationship than I was the coaching brother relationship. He was just so patient and really positive guy. So the lessons learned.
Wow. I have a feeling that 2004, you kind of mentioned it when we were doing the rapid fire, but the 2004 to 2008 period was, it seemed like there was a lot of stuff going on. And that's such a critical period, right? I think you leave and you graduate college. So this is a time when the general population, the civilian world, non-athletes, enters the workplace. But you are also, as an Olympic athlete, have 2 full-time jobs, whatever you're doing vocationally, but then also you're training around the clock. So what was this period like for you?
It was a little bit of a transition. When things were going well, it was great. I was training all the time. I had enough money to get by. I had a sponsorship with ASICS. I had a sponsorship with the New York Athletic Club that sponsored athletes for their travel and tournament fees, singlets and gear. And then I had a 501c3 set up to take training donations, which a lot of the athletes did at that time. We weren't getting paid the way the athletes are now with the sponsors and the social media. There was friends of mine who were wealthy wrestlers in finance that started this thing called the Gold Medal Fund. So if you were first, second, or third in the Worlds or Olympics, you got a scaled like prize money, which was a big chunk. I think for the Worlds, it's $100K for gold. Then it maybe goes 50, 25. For the Olympics, it was 250,000. Then it scales maybe 175 or something for medals. So they kept people in the sport a lot more because of those things. And for me, the transition was, it was hard. You had more free time because you weren't in class all the time. You were training, but you didn't compete as much as you did in college. For international competition, you'd have like 5 big tournaments a year and then a couple like in between, but you really didn't compete all the time. So you're really just training, coaching and just trying to get by. And then I got injured. I won that world title in 2005, and then I was wakeboarding, which is like my favorite hobby. I fell, and then I broke a bone in my foot and tore a ligament. And I, when it happened, I was like, it bubbled up, and there was my foot was collapsing, like the arch of my foot was collapsing. So I was like, something's definitely wrong. So I went to get an X-ray, and they were like, the first person I got an X-ray from locally on Long Island said, I think it's this thing called Liz Frank fracture, which is actually a ligament tear. And they have to go in and they have to put 2 pins in between your metatarsals and then like reconstruct the arch a little bit of your foot. Otherwise, it never really heals. You don't run the same. You can't spring off that foot really. So I was like mad because she was like, at that time, no one knew anything about this injury. It wasn't as common, or it was misdiagnosed a lot. So she told me, well, you'll never compete again. Your career's over. You're not going to go to the Olympics. And like any athlete, you're like, that's stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. Like, she's the doctor, right? So I'm like, I'm going to do whatever. So I kind of went home and cried and said, well, is this true? Like, we need more opinions. Like, this can't be the case. Like, my foot's not that bad. Like, it's there. It did fall off. So I then went to the guy that was like the orthopedist for the Jets at the time, but he really focused on knees. I think he was like more knees, elbows, shoulders guy. And he thought it was just a fracture in my metatarsal because there was probably a broken bone there as well as the ligament tear. So he just treated me with a walking boot for like 3 months. And he's like, all right, you're good to go. And so that was all the news I needed to hear. I was excited. I was like, all right, great. I'm going to be back. Now, we're back on course. Then like 3 months later, nothing healed, nothing improved. I still couldn't run on it. I couldn't jump on it. It just wasn't working. I was like, something's up with this thing. So then I went to get another opinion in Boston. And the guy said, it did an x-ray. He's like, yeah, of course, you have a Lisfranc break. I can see it right in the x-ray. I said, these things you don't need an MRI for, a CAT scan. Like, it's right in the x-ray. You can see the way it's laying. I said, you need surgery immediately to fix this thing. Otherwise, you just can't fix it. So then I dove even deeper, and I was like, forget it. I'm getting the right guy now. I just, got on the internet and did all this research I could find on this injury and found that Ty Law and Terrell Owens used the guy in Baltimore while they were like at peak NFL. And they were like, obviously they're going to go to the best guys. That's what I assumed at that time. So I emailed this guy. I gave him like this, sob story about my Olympic career is over. I need you, blah, blah, blah. So he got me in right away and he fixed it. But this took like a year and a half, almost 2 years off of training to figure this all out. Wow. By the time I was really back in action, it was like 2007. So it did a number of things to me. I never had an injury that took me out of competing for that long. So then it really psychologically messed with me. I healed up, and it healed up. His foot feels great. The guy did a wonderful job. But I got really heavy because all I could do was lift upper body. Couldn't run, couldn't do all these things. So my upper body got big, and I was like 180 pounds. I wrestled 145, which is feasible, but got me kind of out of making weight, and I had to shrink my body down. So that was a challenge. I also had a lot of free time to like think about life, which is the worst thing you could do as an athlete. I think you need to be busy.
I agree.
Busy.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're like, existential questions. What does this mean? Blah, blah, blah. Yes. What do I want to do with my life? How do I want to make money? It's a big world out there. Space is big. Like, is wrestling that important? And like that, as soon as you have those conversations with yourself, you are halfway done. But I still motored through. Those are just kind of back and forth, internal thoughts that you kind of push down and get out. And then I started training again. But I never really got back in rhythm, which was frustrating. I got back. My first tournament back, I beat the guy that was currently ranked number 1 for the US. But then I wasn't in great conditioning. I couldn't get my full conditioning back. So it was like my first tournament. And you need reps. It's like getting ring rust as a boxer or a UFC fighter or a tennis. If you don't play it, if you practice tennis all the time, you're not competing. It's not quite the same, I don't think. It's your awareness on the court or your awareness on the mat, or just like these intangible things you don't realize. The anxiety of competing versus being comfortable in practice, like there's major differences to that. And you get tired a lot faster, even if you're in great shape. So I had a big win, but then I lost twice in that tournament on the wrestlebacks. I was like, all right, well, it's first back. I'm working the kinks out. But I just struggled so much to get down to weight too. And when I would get down to weight, I would feel like a bear in the first period. And I would just dive because I wasn't getting the nutrition in. I was crash dieting, which was common for this because we weighed in the night before, but I just wasn't really getting in rhythm and feeling good. So I made the last chance qualifier because I missed weight, which is this regional qualifier to go to the Olympic trials. So I missed weight. I got down to 146 and the weight's 145. And I was like, oh, no. So then I called the head of USA Wrestling, or whoever it was, the coach. And I was like, if I qualify at the weight above, can I wrestle 145 at the Olympic trials, the 66 kilograms weight, the lower weight? He said, yeah, you can. As long as you qualify, you're not going to get a very good seed, but you'll get in the bracket. I was like, great. So I just started stuffing my face to get big enough to wrestle the guys that are 163 pounds, 74 kilos, which is a whole different body frame. These are big guys coming from some 200 pounds, 190. They're big, tall, wide, big guys. So I had like 8 matches in a day after being down to weight, and then I won. So I qualified, but it was like gritty and just like desperate, and I got through it. But it wasn't ideal for peaking, for the Olympic trials. So then, I got ready for the Olympic trials, and then actually had E. coli, which made me make weight really easy. I got really sick with like a stomach bacteria infection, I guess. And it was about a month before the trials. So I was really light, which I had no problem making weight, but I lost a lot of power. So like after the weigh-ins, usually you go from 145 to about 170. Most guys, when they're actually competing, they're much bigger than the weight you made, because you put the hydration back in your system and you eat. Mm-hmm. So I certainly, no excuse, because on my best day, that was certainly not guaranteed. And I wouldn't have been the number one seed that year, but it certainly didn't help. I had lost to a guy that I had, the last 3 matches we wrestled, I won. And then, that was it. It's pretty much one and done. Only the top guy goes. So it was a little bittersweet and frustrating, but, a ton of travel and life experience during that time as well. I did compete internationally for a while. You got a little adversity thrown at you. You learn how to cope with that. It makes you stronger. And also, I have something to prove in my career as well, because of that. Sometimes wrestlers who are Olympic champions and world champions and try to transition to something else, you don't have the same drive. And it's just like, I already did everything I can ever do. Like my life, I was peaked at 25 or 30 years old. And you're like, well, what's next? And sometimes that happens. So now I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder to chase other things, which I think could be a good thing.
I've never thought about it that way. And I think that's such a fantastic perspective in the sense of like having that chip on your shoulder, maybe because in the earlier chapter, you just hadn't accomplished all the things that you would accomplish. And maybe that might explain my continuing chip on my shoulder after not having closed out, my athletic career in the way that I had hoped. And, so not having made the Olympics. And then do you remember your last match?
Not in great detail. Maybe it's a block or PTSD. I don't remember much about the match at all, honestly. I don't know the score. I don't even know how I was scored on or taken down. I wonder why that is, because I think I remember getting old. So maybe not all of them. I'm trying to think of other losses that sting. I certainly remember most of the scores and losses. Your wins you don't always remember. You remember the big ones, but it's really the losses that really you don't forget. But that one, I don't. I remember not feeling well. I remember for the first time, because one of the assets I had was pretty strong, and most people felt that I was strong, and I felt certainly weaker than him, which is the first time I've had that feeling ever competing.
So what's your? So what's your last wrestling memory, of you competing? What's the last thing that you remember?
I mean, I remember that. I just don't remember the specifics of the match. That was the last time I competed. So. I remember going to that tournament in Iowa City, I believe. And it's not an amazing memory. And then what's your last memory of
knowing I'm done? Do you remember that moment?
I was exhausted mentally, physically there, so I knew I was done for a while. To this day, I still flirt with fighting or doing something. I can't let it go. Like any good wrestler that doesn't feel fulfilled never really wants to let it go. I train like an animal just because of that. I'm always ready. So, but to your point, it was probably that match. I had broken my nose bad and my septum was torn apart. So I had that fixed. I was like, if I'm going to get this nose fixed, I'm probably not going to do a combat sport anymore because I want to feel like breaking it again. So that was like a nail in the coffin as well. I was like, I think I'm done wrestling now. Because I was going to wait. I was like, all right, I'm going to get so I can breathe. So I couldn't breathe out of my nose when I slept because it was completely broken this way and this way. So my septum, it was like a mess. So I was like, all right, when I'm done competing, I'll finally get it fixed. So that was the other thing that solidified. I was like, I'm not going to do this thing anymore. So world trials and then that. Olympic trials.
Olympic trials. And have you gotten it fixed? I assume you got it fixed?
Yeah, it was okay. Yeah, that was 2008. That's what I mean. Okay. I got it fixed right after. I was like, all right, if I'm going to do this, then I'm probably not going to compete anymore. So I was like, let me just fix this thing. So that was kind of when I made the decision. I was like, I'm not going to compete anymore.
You kind of mentioned that psychologically, that period, it kind of threw you for a loop. But I think that for most athletes, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, cognitively, fill in the blank, whatever. I think it's a journey. For me, it was. I think it took me 10 years to make the transition. It's like moving this massive Titanic cruise ship. And once you think you're over, then this other layer comes up and you're like, wow, I thought that was fixed. I thought that was resolved. I was just talking to another athlete before this, and I said, how long did your transition take? And Seabuck, I think, is, mid-50s. I was like, still going, Prim, still going.
Yeah.
So from a psychological perspective, what was your experience during the earlier parts of that transition and leaving wrestling, recognizing like, this is it?
It was really hard. I tried to kind of come back or flirt with the idea of coming back a lot. And I'm not quite over sports. I'm trying to stay in shape. Who knows? Maybe there's an old man sport I could do. If you find one, send it my way so I can compete at the world level. Send me some, maybe spike ball. Can I be a spike ball champion?
I feel like you're better than Spike. I feel like you're better than Spike Ball. I mean,
I'm teasing. I mean, I'm half joking, but to his point, I agree. The transition's it's ongoing, because you're never really satisfied. There's no perfect time to retire. It's why you see Michael Jordan came back, a bunch of times, right? And when the baseball came back, they played for the Wizards, was like a player owner. No one really wants to let go. I think Tom Brady will be the only one to play till he's 80. I don't know that guy. I don't know how he's doing it, but it's really hard. So, I'd be lying if I said, "Oh, it's amazing. I'm done with that. I don't think about it." I do. And every athlete has those dreams. You wake up sweating. Like, oh, I was in the middle of a match or a fight or something. I think about doing MMA because, like, you don't compete that much. You only train a little bit. It's not fun because you get hit hard. But we wrestled every weekend and made weight every weekend. It's tough because you're getting punched and kicked, but you do it like once a year. They're all MMA, Bellator, UFC, PFL, and the wrestling background is like a huge asset. It's really big.
It is. I was just about to say, if you're going to pick a sport, don't pick spike ball. That would be an easy transition into MMA. So that could be an option. You kind of mentioned, I think earlier you said something, I'm going to paraphrase here. Hopefully I'm not missing the mark, but you mentioned something about not really saying goodbye, or have you been able to say goodbye to wrestling at all?
Yeah, I mean, goodbye as far as an athlete, pretty much. I don't have any aspirations to compete at wrestling because I just can't. There's no way I could, at 40, 41, this coming year, it's just not reasonable. So it's gone.
In the ways that, and I ask that in a way that I have no doubt that you've already said goodbye. But one thing that I learned during my second year in the PhD program and my clinical supervisor, I was terminating with a bunch of my clients, and I was really, really upset. It was sad. I had roughly 12 to 15 clients, and it was sad for me. And she kind of mentioned, well, how do you process other transitions? How do you process other goodbyes? And she said, because oftentimes, however you experience one transition and one goodbye is going to probably mimic your responses to other transitions and to other goodbyes. And I was like, wow, that's really fascinating. I hadn't really thought about that. And so that makes me think about your experience of how do you say goodbye and how do you oftentimes, transition? And I'll share my experience of, with tennis, I was always awful at goodbyes. It's just uncomfortable. There's like this permanence to it. I kind of avoided it. And because I didn't specifically and explicitly say goodbye, it remained in my life and manifested itself into this eating disorder and all these other and relational issues, all these things for 10 plus years. And by the time I was in my early 30s, today at 41, but in my early 30s, I was like, dude, something's wrong. Like, I can't keep doing this. So I went and got therapy. And so just offering some of that context of today, now I like when I'm saying goodbye to something or someone or something of myself, I make it a point, to write a letter. My therapist has had me like specifically write a letter, ESPN, write a letter, my broadcasting career, whatever it is, to like really say goodbye in my own words. And so I kind of set that tone of, in what ways have you been able to say goodbye in any of those fashions to wrestling?
Are you writing the letter to yourself as like a closure, or are you writing it to the people, the employers or the team or the coach?
Yeah. So when I wrote that letter to tennis and when I wrote that letter to ESPN, I talked to it as if it's a person, because that's what sports is. It's literally like a relationship, right? Kind of people kind of say like, this is a relationship since I was like 4 or 5 years old. And so when I was writing that letter to tennis, and we've seen those retirement letters, right? That athletes often post on their social media accounts. And so for me, it was like, just kind of expressing my gratitude. I wouldn't be where I am without you, but also, you took me through some of my biggest pains, some of my biggest losses. I was upset that, this didn't end the way we had hoped. I feel like you're breaking up with me. And so there's just like this dialogue and talking to the game as if it is a person, because it's a relationship, right?
Right. Well, I think that sounds healthy and sounds like good for closure. I think I'm probably an avoidant love language guy, maybe. So I don't know. Maybe I avoid it because I certainly haven't gone through that exercise, really. No.
Yeah.
Maybe because I, like the other person you interviewed, that he's like, I'm still working through that transition, type of thing. Maybe because it's like a wound that's close, probably scarred, but it's still kind of there. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's good. I mean, otherwise I'd probably be fat and lazy because I'm still just holding out. I'm still staying in shape, still staying ready to go.
Well, I have, in the little that I know of you, but just in this hour, I would imagine that you could still be in shape and still have that chip on that shoulder. You seem like somebody who has a lot of fuel in the tank, like a huge drive that's just greater than the general population, but also like they don't have to be like binary or mutually exclusive. Like you could have all those things. And then also, if you wanted to, also say goodbye to wrestling.
Yeah, it's probably be a healthy exercise to do. I don't know if I've done it in that way. I think I know I have said goodbye to the sport. I mean, like I'm so involved, it's hard because I'm always around it with helping Harvard, with Beat the Street scaling like it's doing, and then staying involved with friends and family members and things like that. So, it's always going to be a big part of my life. It's just one of those things you never get away from it, even if you really wanted to. But I mean, the competitive aspect of it. Yeah, maybe it's helpful to really put a nail in that coffin to end it. But like I am at peace and I'm very confident that I'm not competing anymore. I've had plenty of opportunities to compete in open tournaments or old man tournaments or even try to make comebacks. And I entertained it in 2012 a little bit. I was working and I was training at night, and I was like, this isn't. You got to really commit. This isn't like the executive training program where you could just compete with the best in the world, in Russia and Iran and Cuba and, Turkey and the United States, and not do it full time. So, but, you still compete with people and you're like, I can still do it. So, but I'm past that. I don't have any regrets. It's unfortunate because it's one of those things where, when you train for the Olympics, you have a ton of life lessons and they're important. But really, if you're going to sacrifice 4 years of your life, it's better to get that medal. It's always better to get that medal. Just because, you put that time in, you want to cash out. So.
Yeah. So then what is your medal today? What's your North Star?
What I'm chasing for goals? Well, the next 2 months, it sounds like conversations the past week, I'm going to raise money for a fund that's going to invest in Web3 and be kind of venture-based, but also have a portion that could trade the token economy, Bitcoin, Ethereum. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but...
I'm not I'm one of those people that I need the Bitcoin for Dummies 101. I know nothing about it. Yeah. Right.
So, that will feed, my financial goals and building a fund and hopefully growing a business and maybe selling a business or making money for people. And the other thing is I want to contribute to the arts. I want to write and potentially direct a film I'm proud of. So in the past 10 years, my brother and I put a lot of time in. We've seen every independent film project you could ever imagine, thousands of projects. We've written 3 screenplays. We've had every meeting with every person you could imagine. We've worked as stunt choreographers, stunt actors, producers, everything up and down the line. So I think it's egotistical to think that I could be a good writer, but it's kind of a beautiful thing to have a legacy of a piece of art that you just send out to the universe, get judged if people like it or not. I think that's an interesting kind of thing. But whether it's music or film, it relates to people in different ways. And, no legacy's forever, unless maybe you invent the wheel or something. But, you know what I mean? Like, especially you have you're a president or sports legacies, they age out and die. There's a new person who's stronger, faster, better. But, some movies will last 100 years, 200 years, and they'll kind of motivate people or, touch people in different ways. So I think that's beautiful and something I am chasing. Yeah, a little bit.
That's awesome. Yeah, your social account with your brother is hilarious. You guys seem to have a lot of fun together. And it's so interesting to think about your creativity in sport and in wrestling and how that might be transferring over into some of the work that you're doing. And so the art that you're creating now, while it was on the mat before, seems to be kind of manifesting in different ways.
Yeah, I think wrestlers are creative. I think that you see a lot of guys go into acting. Tom Cruise was a high school wrestler, and Mark Ruffalo is a wrestler, and Chris Pratt, and there's a lot of people that grew up in the sport. And I think that there's a lot of personalities. It's also being comfortable in front of people, bearing it all. It's kind of that's performance. And when you're on stage alone, whether it's theater or even in film or TV, a lot of times you have to deliver. It's kind of out there alone. You're with scene partners, but it's really individualized. When you're building a character, a lot of it's based on life experience and different things. So, yeah, I think that's one thing people don't realize about the combative arts. It's really creative, and for that reason, it makes for really interesting personalities, I think.
And I think life lessons are so deeply interwoven into martial arts and the combative sports. And so what are some of the few lessons that you learn from wrestling that are just kind of your pillars that you abide by today at 40 or 41?
I always say this, the juxtaposition between confidence and humility, because you develop this confidence and inner arrogance that if you walk into any room, you're physically comfortable, right? You have a presence, you've been through it all, you've endured, you cut 30 pounds in 4 days, you've been beat up all the time, you've been embarrassed and lost and gotten humiliated. So you have that humility. You know that there's always someone faster, stronger, and better. But you also, when you're walking out, to your match or to your fight in that world, you're paired with this dread, but this utmost confidence that you think you're like a god. And then when you step in the ring or the circle or whatever it is, it kind of all just washes away. And you're just it's just muscle memory, and you're just operating. Okay, I got to move. I got to duck. I got to grab him here. I got to execute. And but that's a constant inner monologue for combative artists and fighters or wrestlers. It's just you're always telling yourself, I'm the best. I'm prepared. I'm ready. I'm going to beat this person. I'm going to beat him. But then those thoughts creep in where you're just but I did lose that time. Or am I tired? Do I feel sick? My warm-up wasn't that good. So and life can be that way, whether you're you have a big meeting, you're going and facing investors, or, you have to have that confidence, but you also have to have that humility. And wrestling gives you the capacity, a huge capacity for suffering and enduring. And that gives you this badge of honor to go tackle the rest of the world. Dan Gable, who I listed as one of my favorite athletes, always said, once you've wrestled, everything else is easy. And obviously that's a big, wide blanket statement, but it has a lot of truth. I think that there's tougher things in the world you could do for sure. But, a life of a wrestler is a lot of dedication and sacrifice and suffering for a goal and to accomplish those goals. Also, I think, kind of where you measure up on a daily basis and a weekly basis with your goals, right? You either win or lose in practice, right? You either win or lose in a match, and it's no one else's fault but your own. When you're a trader in finance, you're either, your mark-to-market profit and loss on the day. You're either winning or losing. The market's up or you're down. And when you have to answer to investors on a daily basis, weekly, quarterly, and the fiscal year, there's some similarities there. And you have to interact with other people, and there's that team camaraderie. The trading desk is just like a fraternity house almost, or a sports team. So I think that wrestling specifically has prepared me a lot for a lot of things I'm doing, in my career. But also just knowing that it's not going to be as hard as what I've been through. So when I go to tackle new things, I'm confident I can get it done, even if it seems really daunting and difficult.
That's awesome. Beautifully said. And last question, I kind of mentioned this to somebody else the other day, but in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be speaking to a university, another athletic program, and my role is to speak to some of the student athletes and also the athletic staff about just general care. And so within the context of care, I always think about the transition from sport and leaving sport. So what do you think you would have said to yourself, whether that was in the 2008 you or the 22-year-old you? What would you say to yourself in preparation for that transition?
It's a great question. I think I would have said it doesn't have to be your dream job, but just take it. Like there was periods of time where it's like, oh, I could do this or that, and you flounder a little bit, and that sometimes makes things worse. Like I don't want you to just take any offer, right? But like the biggest thing is you take one opportunity, it leads to another opportunity, it leads to the ideal opportunity. So I think some people get the perfect opportunity right away, and then that's their lifetime at Goldman Sachs, their lifetime at a venture fund or wherever they go. But there was moments in my life where I was hesitant, didn't pull the trigger fast enough. I felt, and I was like, I don't really want to do that. I don't know, but you don't know what you're going to learn in that skill set, and you're going to take that to the next thing. And I don't know what the advice would be. I was like, be decisive, basically. The worst decision you can make is no decision. A wrong decision you certainly can come back from, but no decision's worse. So just make the decision and go. Stay busy. Because when I was, transitioning and hurt, that the downtime was not good for me. It's not psychologically. It wasn't good.
Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Jesse. You have such an amazing story, and it's obviously ongoing. And, thank you so much for coming on and opening up. I really appreciate it, and dealing with my questions, my hard-hitting questions. So, and for anyone that wants to kind of find you and follow you, where can they see you?
Well, and my Instagram is Jesse Jantzen. So just my name. And then I'm on LinkedIn and different places. Twitter, I don't use that much, but I have a Twitter as well. It's Jesse Jantzen 1. So I'm around. Thank you so much. It was really fun. And I hope you got something out of it as well. So
yes, no question. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Really hope you enjoyed today's conversation. For more episodes, please visit our homepage on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. And just a friendly reminder that you can watch the full version of all these episodes on YouTube. You can just search for The Next Chapter with Prim Siripipat. Subscribe to us, like us, give us a star rating. We really appreciate you listening and showing support. The Next Chapter with Prim Siripipat is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.